There you go, that was Boris Johnson speaking here in Glasgow a little earlier on today. And you're very welcome, I should say, to COP26. We are here with GBNews covering the conference for the next 2 weeks. There are representatives from over 200 countries. Today alone, there are world leaders from over 120 countries, tens of thousands of delegates also here in Glasgow as well. Among them, it must be said, at least on an observer basis, is Andy Burnham, the Mayor of Manchester, and he is here arguing that actually a green agenda is an attempt to reindustrialise the northwest of England in the years to come. And I had a chance to speak to him here in Glasgow this morning about what he saw as the advantages and opportunities for COP26 for the northwest of England. Let's have a listen.
If we really embrace the drive to net zero, that is the route to level up the country. It's a chance to reindustrialise the north of England. And I think we've got to get our heads into that space now. This is the chance we need to bring about the change that we've been promised, a more balanced country, and crucially, a north of England that has industry of the future. And I'm here to say, I'm ready to work with anybody who wants to make that happen.
It's interesting, the Prime Minister's talked about this a lot, where he argues, Britain's cut its emissions almost by half, but actually GDP has increased. But there's a lot of people in the country still pretty sceptical. They think that actually green issues mean costs for ordinary people.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's the narrative that's got to change. You've got to give people more to work towards that's hopeful and clearly better than what they've got at the moment. So let's take this crucial issue of public transport. Public transport is expensive in some of the poorest parts of the country. And if you compare Greater Manchester to London, it's 3 times as much to catch a bus in Greater Manchester as it is in London. So if you say to people, look, you're going to have to use your car less and not provide an alternative, well, unsurprisingly, people will tell you where to go. But if you say, and we're going to make buses the same price as London, i.e. £1.55 a journey, you're kind of giving people something to work with there. And I think that's the issue here, isn't it? You've got to kind of give people reasons to buy into this.
Would you at least accept, though, that, actually the government is pretty world-leading in all of this? They've set kind of pretty firm targets. They seem to be ahead of the curve compared to even most Western countries when it comes to trying to tackle this issue. And it's clearly something I think Boris Johnson, maybe late to the cause, but is pretty animated and convinced of.
Well, it feels like it's words, not deeds at the moment. But nevertheless, the words are good. And I'm not here to make cheap political points. We have put forward a plan for a net zero Greater Manchester by 2038. And actually, if we were to go on that journey now with backing from the government, that would deliver the levelling up that they've promised. So I think there is an opportunity here for people to come together and really embrace this, but it needs substantial investment up front now of the kind that Rachel Reeves, Shadow Chancellor, has been talking about. We need long-term predictable funding so that we can get the retrofitting of people's homes going, so that we can bring on new industrial clusters around green energy, green hydrogen, so that we can remove the carbon from our public transport system. So, we know what needs to be done, and Greater Manchester is ready to go. We just need the government to say now, right, OK, we see if we empower our cities to move fast on this, we'll probably be more likely to hit 2050 as a country. That's the change that we need. And last week's budget didn't deliver it.
In saying that, Britain can only do so much. I mean, Manchester can only do so much. This has to be a global effort. Everyone seems terribly pessimistic today. That, this might not be the breakthrough moment. We heard from Prince Charles, the last Chancellor, and all that sort of stuff. I mean, are you kind of quite pessimistic too?
Well, you come here, don't you, with a bit of that, but I hope I appear reasonably upbeat in this interview, in that, I've just criticised the government in one way, but they did give us £1 billion for public transport in the budget last week, which is definitely a very good start and a good foundation to build on. Maybe something's going to happen in this fortnight. Maybe there is going to be a sort of collective moment where everyone says, look, net zero is the thing that can take us out of the pandemic, can bring prosperity to people, better jobs for people, more livable communities. Maybe this thing now everyone has to embrace it. Who knows? That could happen. But for me, this critical thing about climate justice and social justice. This could be the path to a more equal country. This could be the path to closing the north-south divide. This could be the route to reindustrialising the north of England in a good way, in a way that gives us industry of the future. So for all of those reasons, why not embrace it? And why not work together? I think the government needs to change policy, though, on a national level to make it happen. I think it requires more devolution of power out of Westminster to the regions, and I think it needs, they need to allow greater control, public control of transport, energy and housing if we're to get the change that we need in the time frame.
But do you understand why some people are sceptical, maybe frustrated, maybe annoyed, and they look at kind of these politicians and leaders and maybe even members of the royal family saying people should eat less meat or they should change their lifestyles, they should drive less. And yet, these are also people who are flying around in private jets, who own loads of homes.
Sure.
There is a sense where actually lots of these people who are preaching to people aren't actually taking on those individual responsibilities themselves.
Oh, definitely. I mean, there's loads of that about this, isn't there? And as I say, we've got to get out of the thing where entitled, well-off people look like they're looking down at people and not telling them what to do. You've got to give people genuine incentives to move in this direction. If you take retrofitting people's homes, it's the way you can reduce the cost of living for people. Because if you make people's homes cheaper to heat and to light, that's going to be a benefit to them, isn't it, on the bottom line? Or if you help people buy an electric car, they're much less expensive than a petrol or a diesel car. So the point for me would be help people with the upfront costs of change, because actually then you can reduce the cost of living for people and you can close some of the divides that we have in society. If net zero becomes a way of doing that, actually narrowing the gap between the poorest and the richest, then I think more people might buy into it.
Just finding two kind of slightly connected issues. One on this fishing row that we're seeing. I mean, effectively, do you think this is all a distraction? Do you think we can afford, essentially, this kind of trade war with France, not just when COP's going on, but also the time when actually there are supply chain issues and all that sort of stuff?
I think this is part of our problem as a sort of, not just as a country, but as a global community. We've had a decade of highly divisive politics where people on the extremes of politics have been screaming at each other, and we've had all of the divisive debates that we've had. And now we're at COP where people have to come together, and it feels like the fishing row is a hangover of the last decade of polarised politics. And I think we need to get out of that and get into dialogue again, a different way of doing politics. I've been, as many people have been, looking back at the Blair and Brown documentary, and it feels to me then that politics was bigger. It was kind of more, didn't get everything right, of course not, but at least the world was working as one. You remember the bit where Gordon Brown brings the world together in 2008 in the middle of the financial crash and, made a substantial intervention. It doesn't feel like there's the leadership around at this moment to kind of replicate that kind of approach, but that's what we need. It's what we need here. We need somebody to grab this summit by the kind of scruff of its neck and really bring people to the table and say, look, come on, let's put aside the kind of polarised positions that everybody's in. And I wonder whether we can snap out of that slightly polarised populist politics that we've kind of sunk into in recent times. And
then just very finally on that, actually, because it leads on to this about polarised politics, I know Angela Rayner's apologised for the kind of Tory scum comments. I mean, do you think in future, maybe particularly Labour politicians, need to be careful about the language they use when it comes to politicians?
I'd say all politicians. I wouldn't single out Labour politicians because we get attacked as well. All politicians get attacked, and I thought Angela put out a really, really well considered statement last week. I mean, I said at the time I wouldn't use that language. I think all of us in the heat of moments say things sometimes that we regret, and when we do, we're obviously. Believe it or not, politicians are human beings as well. I think everyone does, as I say, I think we need to move beyond this kind of period that we've been in of quite poisonous politics, and it has been quite poisonous at times on the left and the right at times. We need to move back to kind of respecting each other's opinion, even if we disagree, and conducting public debate in a better way, getting beyond some of the kind of simplicities of social media. As I say, the Blair Brown documentary for me kind of showed us politics when it was bigger, when it was more equal to the problems that the world faces, and now it feels like it's got smaller and a bit more childlike and immature, and we need to, the problems we're facing are too big to allow that to continue. Maybe COP26 in Glasgow brings the world back together, resets things a bit, you've got to hope that that's going to be the case, haven't you?